These speakers behind me are actually the first pair of monitors that I ever had in a studio setup. And right now they're sitting in the corner of my room, not being used anymore. And seeing them in the corner of my studio like this actually reminds me of my first ever home studio setup, where I had them sitting in the corner of the room kind of like this, where my first ever studio setup was kind of stuck in the wedge of a corner, and just how horrible that sounded. And being in the corner of your room is actually the worst place to be when setting up your speakers in a mixing environment. And that's because of the way that low frequencies tend to build up in the corners of a room, and all of that low frequency information coming out of your speakers, being that low frequencies are kind of omnidirectional, they go everywhere. It means that the low frequencies coming out of your speakers actually come out of the back of the speaker as well, and they build up in that corner there. And if you have both your speakers locked into that corner, you're going to have a lot of issues with your low frequency representation in your mix. So often what happens is you hear everything too bass heavy, so you remove a lot of bass out of your mix, and then when you go and listen to your mix in a different environment, all of a sudden all that low frequency is gone and it sounds like your mix is thin and horrible and maybe nasally or something like that. So the best position to place your speakers ideally is at the far end of your room on the smallest wall with the longest distance between this wall and then the back wall. So as you can see in my studio, I've got my speakers right behind me, and then the next wall is the longest one away. And that's because then we get our speakers throwing further, and those reflections take a little bit of time to come back to our ears, and we can treat them and capture them and do all kinds of acoustic treatment. So ideally, you put your speakers on the wall where it's going to have the longest distance behind you. If you can't do that and you have to be on one of the other sides of the room, you can also position yourself there. You're just going to have some shorter reflection times behind your head. And there are many different ways to treat that. We'll get to that in a minute, but this is one of the biggest mistakes that people make when setting up their speakers in their room. You need to be on one wall and be in the center of that wall. You don't want to be too near the sides either, because then, say for example, if you set up your speakers more to the left, well then the reflections from the speaker are going to come off that wall and get to your ears quicker than the ones on the right hand side. You're going to have differences in the reflections in time, and then you're going to get weird phase cancellations, and that's going to affect your ability to hear your mix as well. So this is the biggest mistake that I see most people make when posting their home studios on different forums or whatever, or on social media. Definitely stay out of the corners of your room and try and be in the center of one of the walls. Whichever wall works for you, just be in the center of that area. And while we're talking about placement, the last thing you need to remember is that you need to be equidistant in an equilateral triangle from each of your speakers. So you don't have one speaker's sound arriving at your ear faster than the other speaker arriving at your ear. And you can do this very simply with a tape measure. It's not rocket science, but it will make a huge difference to the way you perceive your mix. The second huge mistake that I see people doing in their home studios is not acoustically treating their room. Now behind me, once again, you can see there's a black wall. That black wall is actually all acoustic treatment. They're big acoustic panels designed to soak up some of the low frequency problems that exist in this room. They also have a cloth front, and they're soft so that they absorb some of the high frequencies, and that helps when I'm recording vocals and drums and guitars in this room. And I have a few different panels situated around this room to get the most out of the acoustic environment that I'm in and treat some of those reflections and absorb some of the low frequency problems as well. So once you've got your speakers set up correctly, then you need to put that acoustic treatment in the first areas of reflection. So there'll be one on the left and right, so it's where the speakers first reflect on the left and right and then arrive at your ears. And the other one that is often forgotten about is the ceiling. So what you need to do is also treat the ceiling above your mix position, because you're going to get another different reflection time coming from your speakers, hitting your ceiling, and then back down to your ears. And the acoustic paneling that we usually put up above our heads or mounted to the roof, we usually refer to them in the audio industry as clouds. And it's these clouds that make the biggest difference to the acoustic environment, I feel personally, because both speakers are arriving at your ceiling and coming down to your ears and causing some big problems for mixing. But also the ceiling is one of the biggest parallel surfaces in your room, and therefore you need the most absorption of low frequencies there too. too. But that's a whole other thing. We can get into that another time. But what you need to know is, number one, you need to treat your room, first of all. Make sure you have some kind of acoustic treatment. And I'm not talking about foam panels. Don't use that egg carton looking foam stuff, and egg cartons don't work either. None of that stuff works. You need real acoustic panels. And if you're not sure on how to build panels, I've done a video on that ages ago. I'll put a link to it down below, but it's very cheap and cost effective thing to do to make your room sound a lot better and also create a nice mix environment as well. So make sure you acoustically treat your room. And the third and final huge mix mistake I see people making all the time is placing their speakers on their desk. Now, I've made a video about this ages and ages ago as well, and it's actually one of my most disliked videos. But the thing is that even still to this day, it is so true. If you have your speakers sitting on your desk, you are making a huge, huge mistake. And whilst plenty of people do this, they just put their speakers on their desk or just sitting flat on a surface, it is not the right thing to do in a mix environment. And I'll put a link down below to that video as well. But what you need to understand is that if you have your speakers sitting on your desk, they then become coupled to that desk. And when a speaker is coupled to a surface, the vibrations of the speaker then generate through that surface, and basically your desk just becomes a huge sub box that's going to reverberate, and it's going to actually boost all the low frequencies coming from your speaker. And on top of that, your speaker is actually going to vibrate a little bit as well, and the speaker cones are not going to be able to push out and back the way they should. And what basically happens when you've got both those things occurring is a loss of the center image in your mix. So when you're mixing, you can't hear the center of your mix quite accurately, and it gets a bit blurry sounding. And the difference between your left and your right can also get muddled as well. So one of the best things you can do to improve your imaging of the left, center, and right of your mix is actually to decouple your speakers from the desk. Now, this doesn't have to be a super expensive thing. There are heaps of speaker stands available. There are ISO stands that I use personally. I think they're the best way to decouple your speakers from the desk, and they make a huge improvement. However, if you don't want to spend that kind of money, they're usually about $100 or $200. I understand. There are simple foam blocks and different other acoustic solutions to get your speakers decoupled from the desk. There are some other cheap hacks online on how to do this as well. That's fine. Whatever you do, don't place your speakers on the desk. You will be ruining the image of your mix, and you will have a harder time trying to get that final mix result that you're looking for. So just to wrap that up, number one, get your speakers out of the corner of your room and into one of the center positions alongside one of your walls, preferably the smallest wall with the longest distance from the rear wall. Number two, make sure you acoustically treat your room. It is probably the most important part of all of this. And then number three, to really top it off and make sure that you're getting the best possible mix you can from your monitors, decouple them from the desk. It's one of those things that you have to try, and when you decouple your speakers, you will hear a difference. It's quite obvious. So let me know what you guys think down below. And if you've tried some of these methods before, let me know in the comment sections down below what worked for you, maybe what didn't work for you. As always, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I'm Mitch from the DIYrecordingstudio.com. I'll catch you soon.